Is it on?
Going.
Okay. How do you see comments?
Huh?
Oh, it's going.
Yeah, the comments coming over there. I might have a little bit harder time getting to them this time. But, yeah.
How do you want me to signal if there's a question? Because last time I was like, oh, there was one I think you missed, but I didn't want to like interrupt you.
That's, yeah, make it look like there's a phone call. Ooh, speaking of phone, where's mine? Okay. There's two so far. But see, that never, for the numbers you give me, which remember I gotta get numbers from you, the numbers you give me are always higher than that. So I don't know if that's,
I think it's just people coming in and out.
yeah. So, because we're already up to 5.
Can you still see the questions if it's like this?
Yes. Oh, that one's more up front, which means I don't have to worry about it. It just means I should keep this cleaner.
Okay. No, that's fine. Okay, that should be live. Okay, perfect.
Excuse me. And now I have my phone off, so my phone won't make noise. Yay! Hang out, we're telling more followers to join your video. It says hang out, we're telling more followers to join your video. Don't know how it's, so that is the key. I don't know if on the Instagram I can see comments.
Okay, I watch.
Yeah, so if you see those, yeah, then give me signal, because those ones I may have a hard time with. Sorry, trying to decide, sit forward or sit back in the chair or sit forward. Oops, good thing I don't care if that paper stays. It always kills me, that delay, and then hearing myself, I hate that. I'm already making a mess on your floor for you. Sorry. Maybe you should align my area with trash bags. You may never let us do a hands-on one again. All right, so for those of you out there, we have about another couple minutes until noon. So we'll get started promptly right around the noon hour, and so hang out with us for a little bit longer. Let's see. That. I need to bring, my boss has this thing that I could make your phone sit with better next time. She's a stand. Uh-huh. It's actually more supposed to be so you can like look down on something, but I'm sure I could turn it. I'm thinking, well, I have, yes and no, because again, like I said, it's made to hang up and over, not to look front, but I'm pretty sure I can make it look front. So I'll have to remember that next time. Yeah, because I'm already down to, if I look at the Facebook one, it already says only 3, and it was up to 5. So that's why I kind of wonder how that works. But oh well, question for another time. All right, well, I see that it is hit noon, so welcome everybody to, I guess I'll say this month's lesson about kind of indoor flowers. So we're going to talk about fresh flower cutting and arranging, some things to think about. We figured this would be a timely topic with Valentine's Day coming up and how to keep our flowers nice for the occasion. So as always, my name is Nikky Witkowski. I'm the Agricultural and Natural Resource Extension Educator in Porter County, so you can feel free to follow up with me with any questions that come up. This program is in conjunction with Gabis Arboretum here in the Valparaiso area and working with Purdue Northwest. So again, welcome everybody to this week's or this month's program. It's a little earlier than what we have been doing on our schedule. It's only like 3 weeks instead of 4, but we thought again this would be nice and timely. So welcome to all of our followers today. So again, like I said, what we're going to start out talking today is what to do about the lovely flowers that we get over Valentine's Day. So some tips and advice is the fact that if you are expecting flowers or if you are getting flowers for someone, some quick tips to think about can actually start before the flowers are actually purchased or arrive. So one thing to think about is I have, for example, here a small bud vase. When you are expecting flowers or think you might get flowers, one thing you want to do first off would be to actually cleanse this container. So when we are trying to keep our flowers fresh, you hear about like these lovely sugar packets or flower preservative packets that come with it. And we'll talk about these and other options as well. But one component of actually these that they have is usually some sort of an antibacterial. The problem is the fact that if we put fresh flowers in these over and over and over, we can get different bacteria that might grow in here, or even algae, maybe. But different things that'll grow in here that will actually cause your flowers to fade faster. So that is why it actually would be very good to actually, after you are done with having flowers or before you get the next set, make sure you thoroughly clean your container, like with soapy water. If you want to do a light bleach solution as well, that wouldn't necessarily be bad as well. But make sure you clean your containers so that way they are fresh for the next use. So with that said, what do you do once you get your flowers? So most commonly what people do is they're going to take this and just go straight into a vase, or they might trim it. And when they trim it, they're going to just go, and I just have some floral shears, they're just going to go trim and throw it in a vase. The problem is that's not really actually the best practice you should consider. What you should actually consider, let me put this way so I don't knock that over, is first of all, you may not have seen it, but what I did here is actually a slant cut. Most people try to make a straight cut like that. Well, when you make a straight cut, the problem is that if this were to hit the bottom of the vase flat on, how's it going to absorb water? It's not as well going to absorb water if it's flat on the bottom. So number one, it's best to make an angled cut. Oops, at the base of this, I try to make that too small. It's best to make an angled cut because even if that is touching the bottom of the vase, you can see that white part of the stem sticking out. And that way we know there is part of that angled surface that will still actually absorb water and possibly some nutrition if we add that to our water, but it'll actually still absorb water very well. Now that's just the first part of making a cut. The other thing that you really should do to be the best is as soon as I make this cut, the plant kind of reacts and it's like, and sucks in. Well, because it's always trying to imbibe water. So the next step that actually is more important is actually we take this water, and I apologize for those on the Facebook, here I can make this a little more visible. What you're not seeing on the Facebook Live as well is that I have a bucket of water right here. And what we actually should do is stick our flower in the water and do our diagonal cut underwater and maybe leave it there for a couple seconds so that way the fresh cut surface will actually imbibe some of that water and therefore be full of water so that when we bring it out, it now does not have any air bubbles left. So that is actually the ideal way if you're going to have cut flowers to cut them is under either a stream of water or underwater in a bucket of water. Now, we're going to set this one aside, and we may not do proper practices on all of our cut flowers today, but I want you to know that that is actually the best practice for doing cut flowers. Now, because the water in here is the next most important step, what we're going to talk about is how do we make this water good and safe for the plants. Now, one thing to think about is this is a bud vase. It's very small and have a very small quantity of water, whereas we might have another option of a vase that is larger. Now, what I actually did here was the fact that this is actually some of if you have those I call them a shower poof, but if you have those shower scrubbers, this was actually a shower scrubber where I cut the strings And that's all this netting was. I'd had it for another project that I did, and I thought it might be a nice filler in this vase. But you can try that. But again, we need this full of water. So make sure when we're doing this water, one thing that we should do is use either some of these floral packets or a recipe for doing some of the water. Now keep in mind with these packets, they're made for a certain amount of water. Think about it. If we were to make a Kool-Aid mix, we don't just dump one packet into a glass of Kool-Aid unless we get like the single serve ones. We have to dilute it over a certain amount of water. And that is true with these packets as well. Now, it may not say on your packet of water to use lukewarm water, but that's actually better for better dissolving, is to use a lukewarm water with your packets. But you also want to use something so that way you can get it to actually absorb in. So we're going to use a lukewarm lukewarm water. And this packet is actually supposed to be dissolved into a pint of water. So, and Peyton, I think we might have lost our, oh, there it goes now. I think we're good now on the Instagram. You might check again. We lost our Instagram feed, so sorry if you lost us there for a minute, but a pint of water is what you're supposed to mix this in. So not a packet per this. You know, this is getting closer to a pint, but still not quite. So if you're just doing a bud vase, I'd recommend either, you know, measure this and, you know, dole it out for what you need so you can have fresh water, or make it in a pint of water. And if you exchange this water, exchange it with the leftover water that you saved from last time. Now, again, like I said, why do we have these packets? Well, when I first got talking, what I mentioned is the fact that you could have bad bacteria and algae or something like that growing still in this vase, or maybe even on the flowers you bring in. So part of what is in this packet is actually something that's going to help to kill off any of those bad things. The second half of why this packet is useful, or this packet, or whatever packet comes with your flowers, the second half of what those are useful for is actually to provide some sugars for the flowers that they can use to basically boost themselves up to stay growing and going nicely while in your cut vases. Now, if you don't want to use the packets, or if you don't have a packet, what you can also do is you can actually make your own. And Purdue has an awesome publication. It's some of the tips we're going to go through on this. But Purdue has a, Peyton, we lost it again. I'm going to do something on your phone, and I think, okay, the Instagram one. All right. So Purdue has this publication about, you know, how to basically keep your flowers fresh, add hours to your flowers. It is publication HO 158. Now, I point that out because on the back here, and I'm going to tell all of you right now what some of these recipes are, but it gives you actually 3 different recipes of how you can actually make your own packets. Now, some of the ingredients on here, so one of the recipes would be like, for example, 2 cups of a lemon-lime carbonated beverage. So something like a 7-Up or a Sprite, for example, would be it. So you'd mix 2 cups of that with 2 cups of water and half a teaspoon of household chlorine bleach. So we're not going to talk something super concentrate, but something normal. Again, the bleach to kill anything nasty that could be in there. But then again, the carbonated beverage is what is going to actually offer some of that sugary stuff to help your plant. If you don't want to go buy a case of pop or, you know, carbonated beverages just for your flowers, you can also use fresh lemon juice. So if you do 2 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice to 1 tablespoon of sugar, and then you mix half a teaspoon of chlorine, and you'll put all of that into 1 quart of water, then that is one of the other recipes. So notice in the one I mentioned first, we didn't talk about water because, I'm sorry, we did say 2 cups of water, but this one's going to say you mix this one in 1 quart of water because, again, they should equal out. The last recipe, if you say, well, I don't have lemon juice, do I have another option? Yes. So you can use 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. So not necessarily apple cider vinegar or, you know, horticultural vinegar. Just use 2 tablespoons of your normal household white vinegar, and then you would mix in 2 tablespoons of sugar. This is going to add up again to 1 quart of water with, again, the half a teaspoon of household chlorine bleach. So those are your three options. If you don't have packets or don't want to use packets, or don't have enough packets, those are your options of making your own household floral preservative and food for your flowers. Now, obviously, we talked about, well, cutting your flowers and the timing and things like that. Obviously, it would be good that you, again, have the water prepared before you, again, work with your cut flowers, because that way, as soon as we cut them, we don't leave them out in the open air very long. What you can't see is that off to the side on this one that I've cut, I actually keep shoving it back into my bucket of water now, so that way I know that end stays as fresh as it can be. So you want to keep doing that to at least give it some sort of water, so that way it stays good as long as you can. So like I said, you can do that. Now, certain flowers are sappy. Most of the flowers you may be getting right now aren't going to be, sappy and trying to, create problems. An example of that would be something like a poinsettia. When you think about poinsettia stems, and if you cut those, they have that milky white sap that comes out. There is a special way to treat those, where basically you would take the stems after you cut them, and you'd actually put them in like a really hot water for like 30 seconds or so, but you have to protect the top half so that it doesn't get the heat. So they're a little bit tricky to get them ready to go so they don't make your water all nasty and just bleed the sap everywhere. They do have a little bit of a trick to them, but it's not too bad. Now, one other thing to point out, and I'm only going to point it out on this one, but I'm not going to say it's a problem, is if you have excessive foliage, like some of these really big leaves, or if I had leaves down the stem, this one has already been de-leafed, I'll say, so that I only have a couple leaves near the top, and we'll talk about, putting this one in a vase later. This one's not bad, but if you have a lot of leaves, your next step on any of your flowers, or your first step, really, because I've been talking all about the vases and the water, your first step on the flowers would be to take off some of those leaves. I could go to the extreme that I pluck off these little leaves on this one as well. It's not necessary. It's not necessarily going to hurt, but that is a step that you can take on things like your carnations. So keep that in mind. Again, these are all things to do prior to even putting your flowers in water. So once you have them kind of prepared, everything's prepared. I have my water, I have my bucket of water or my running water, I have the flowers ready to go. That is then when you would actually take your time to start, again, trimming your flowers for the vase. Now, keep in mind, and I want to talk about this real quick of, again, how do we add length to our flowers, is that if you really want to add length, one thing to also do is actually put them in your refrigerator when you're not using them. That's why when you go to a florist, they're actually in the cases, is because if they are chilled, they'll do better. Now, if you also had, I can pick on this a little bit, but granted, some of these materials were actually donated today by Schultz Florals and Gifts. So I'll show their card up for you guys if you're all curious. But these guys helped to donate some of the materials we're using today. So I give a shout out and thank you to Mackenzie, who was gracious enough to give me some product to show you guys today. And they're in Valparaiso, and I do know they're taking orders now for Valentine's Day so that you make sure you get what you want. So again, this material is good material, but things to watch for is the fact that, if you've got a broken leaf, why leave that on? Pluck it off. If some of your flowers look a little faded, don't put them in. What you may not realize is ripening flowers, fruits, and vegetables give off a gas called ethylene. And this is actually a ripening or maturing hormone gas that they give off. When they're exposed to it, it actually makes them ripen faster, or basically go bad faster. So anytime you have injured foliage or injured, stems and leaves and things like that, it's going to give off more ethylene. Have you ever heard of the trick? Well, how do you get, your bananas to ripen faster? What do? You put it with an apple in a paper bag. Apples leak off ethylene so bad that they are good at basically ripening other fruits and vegetables. So I want you to think about that for a moment and think about, well, then should I ever store my flowers near fruits and vegetables? The answer is no, because if you do that, it will cause your flowers to basically ripen or basically start to fail faster. So you actually want to make sure you store them separately. So if you have a refrigerator full of fresh fruits and vegetables, it's probably actually not a good idea to have them anywhere near each other. And if it's too full of that, you probably don't want to then do the trick of let's store them in the refrigerator, your flowers, because again, it's going to actually work against you in having that. Then I'd say, well, then maybe look for an unheated garage to store them temporarily in if you need to. The other thing I do want to point out is that when I went to grab my greenery today, the one thing that they did is they wrapped it. There we go. I dropped it. Sorry. They wrapped it up in some paper. Now this fell out as I was picking it out. But they wrapped it in some paper. And the reason why is because it is cold outside. It's freezing and it's going to stay freezing. This is living tissue. It's sensitive tissue. So the other thing you don't want when you buy flowers is you do not want this exposed to the freezing temperatures. So do make sure that it is either covered fully in that plastic or covered up somehow. And that also means don't leave it in your car. Don't leave it in a vehicle. You must take it inside. It is too cold outside for it to be left in your vehicle, or it will cause it damage. And remember, we've already said, if you cause it damage, the damage is going to give off more ethylene, and the more ethylene you have, the more it's going to cause problems with making it basically fail faster. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to start with a bud vase, and I'm going to show you how to do some of those aspects first. So do realize I'm going to eventually start covering my face to show you the bud vase instead. Now, one thing else to keep in mind, and this is a bud vase, and this is a really long stem, and like I said, I'm not going to cut these properly so that I can show you more readily. But when we do a bud vase, we want it to be able to have our first leaf of greenery actually be, kind of high in the vase. So this is actually not bad for a first leaf. Now, when we're doing a bud vase, it's nice to have, if you can, multiple stems. Now, I want to point out, when I look at this stem, let me take it out real quick. When I look at this stem, it is very oversized for my vase. So make sure you either choose ones that are sized nicely, or this one might actually be an even better backdrop. So choose them that are sized nicely, or like, I really like this one, but again, it's too big. So I'm just going to trim it off. And we always sometimes might have a little floral waste. So I see these three, and I'm going to back these three with each other. Well, again, I got a broken one, so I'm going to trim the broken off. And then I'm going to say, okay, well, how can I fit them in the vase? My angular cuts again, and we're going to try to shove these in and basically make them stick out like that. Now, feel free to even, shove them in a little bit so that they are tight in the vase. And you can kind of see here, they're obeying and not, that this one is sticking up higher in the back. Now, the next thing that we can do, and you may argue with the order a little bit, is what I also usually like to add to my bud vases. We're eventually going to put nice carnations in it, but I love adding a little bit of this. It's called gypsum, or people otherwise know it as baby's breath. So we're going to add some baby's breath. And again, we just want this to kind of float and fill in. So you can see, if you can't see, well, I'm already bending the stem and bringing it so that way it actually will kind of sink in there nicely. Now, when you're cutting the stems, know where your water level is. It kind of is pointless that if you don't cut the stems long enough to hit the water, it's kind of pointless then to even have water in it. So make sure you're watching the length of your stems. And I'm just going to put a couple sprigs of this baby's breath in here to kind of give it a little bit of a glow. And see, here's where you're going to start running into issues that I have a little bit of a hard time shoving this in, but I just got it. And even though it's living, I can play with a little bit and get it to kind of fluff out a little bit. Arguably, we're going to argue that this is a little too much right here, so we're just going to take that sprig out, and maybe we'll find use for it later. Now, with that all done, we're going to move on to the actual carnations. So I'm going to show you a very simple bud vase, and that's going to involve 3 carnations. Now, when you do this, and it's always nice to do things in odd numbers, when we do this, what I want to do is I want to stagger them. So I want like 1 high, 1 middle, and 1 low. Now, it can be exactly like this, but that means I need to be careful when I cut the stems, and I just kind of approximately measured up and cut them all 3 at once. But we need to make sure we have them kind of spaced out. Now, the more I look at it, I think I like it like that a little bit better so that my flowers are closer together. And if you also notice, look what I got here. Some nice hanging nastiness. So again, like I said, you can do something like you can pull these off it helps doubly in my respect right now, because since I'm making a bud vase, I have to be able to shove these flowers through that mess. And all of this is just gonna bulk up my flowers and make it hard. So I want this first one, the tallest one, to be in the back. So I'm trying to shove it, and it actually went even behind the baby's breath. So I have my tallest in the back, you know, not quite hidden by the baby's breath, but there. Then I'm gonna actually come in from a side and actually shove this one in. And you probably can't hear it, but you can, if you did this in real life, what's happening is you can hear this kind of fighting against some of the ferny leaves, and that's how we are actually getting stability in the vase. If I was doing this arrangement in like the Sahara foam, the green stuff, it would actually, that's what provides the stability. But here, it is some of those ferny leaves providing the stability. So I came this over here, so I'm gonna bring this one in right here and try to get it down and see, see I'm having trouble, there it goes, maybe I got it. There we go, I got it down. Now, but see, it's not lower. So here's where sometimes you have to watch out. And again, remember, to me, it's not low enough, so I need to recut it so that I can get it lower because it was almost equal height. So we're gonna go again. How far down can we go? There we go. See, it went down that time. So there we go. So we have a nice, lovely bud vase. Some of our baby's breath needs to be shifted over a little bit. There we go. And there we go. We have a really nice, simple bud vase. Now, if you watch it sometimes on the ferns, it may not sit up as well, but it's still obviously providing a nice background, kind of coming to the front a little bit. And then we have some of the baby's breath, you know. You can do this without baby's breath, and it still looks pretty, but it's just something that you can, again, add in as a nice little, you know, kind of added color. And then again, we have our nice, you know, pink-tipped carnations. So I'm going to set that one aside. One thing I also want to mention is that we're, again, using carnations today. You don't have to do it always on carnations because they actually are pretty sturdy. But when we actually look at carnations and some of our bigger headed flowers, one thing that you occasionally see, and this would be true a lot more on roses, is you may see that they actually stick a wire up into the head and wrap it down the stem. They are doing that for maybe one or two reasons. The first reason why they definitely may do that on certain flowers is they actually want to give it some stability, because some of them, when they start to fade, they're going to start to topple some. So they wire them so they won't topple. This can be especially true with things like tulips and daffodils occasionally too, but they may wire them. Or sometimes another trick that you can pull, depending on the diameter of the stem, is you can actually use a straw. So when you think about a straw, it could actually provide that stability too. And since you can get colored straws, it can actually give you some of that stability as well. So you can either, like I say, get floral wire, and all you do is basically you stick, you know, one end of it up into the head of the flower, and then, like I said, then gently wrap it around the stem and kind of go down. It doesn't take a lot, but it is, again, just another added step of something that you can do to help give some of that additional stability for your flowers. All right, so we'll get that back out of the way. So the other option that you can also consider, we're going to bring up the other vase again, and this is going to be a new thing working with this for me, is the other option we do have is we have some of these lovely, huge, big leaf hydrangeas. So we have two of the flowers here, and what you can also see is that if you're not careful, this one kind of got a little flat on one side, so that's why I'm going to give it a little shake, and you see it's puffing up. So be careful how you store your flowers in that respect. Some of them can get flat over time, so don't try to keep them flat on something any longer than you have to. There are other flowers like snapdragons, or I'm sorry, not snapdragons, gladiolus. If you see the long stems of flowers, a gladiolus flower, if laid down, could actually start turning up. Now, they say though, the way to stop that from happening is the very top flower bud. It's kind of like the brain of the bunch. If you snap that one top flower off, you snapped off the, quote, brain of the bunch, and that will actually allow the flowers to not turn up. So be aware that, you know, that's why you may see some flowers stored upright, whereas others, like baby's breath and stuff, can stay laying down because they're not going to be affected by it. It's kind of called the geotropism, where basically it's affected by, it kind of feels gravity, and therefore it's reacting because of gravity. So the other thing that we can do is we're going to use these, And I'm gonna just kind of, since we only have two, you can make kind of like a two-sided arrangement. So I'm gonna wind up shoving more of these all in at once, because with what I have, it'll be easier. Oh, there's my other greenery. So I have some greenery here. So what I'm gonna do, since I'm gonna kind of shove it in together and kind of make it almost two-sided a little more initially, is I'm basically taking some greenery and backing it up to each other, and then I'm just gonna hold a couple of their sprigs together to kind of provide a little bit of a round. So since we only have two hydrangeas, so, there we go. I have it backed and around. Whew, some of the spores or something flying off of it. So I'm gonna trim these down once, and then we'll see if I need to trim them again. And you can use kitchen shears. These are actually very small diameter pruners. Either one will work. So I'm gonna shove my greenery in first. And you can see that if you really want this to be wrapped around, you'd be better off actually pulling some of it out, wrapping it around as you go along. And this is gonna fall for now until I get more in. And then we're gonna take our hydrangeas, and I'm just measuring it behind the base. That's all you're not seeing. And the leaves are nice here, but I think there's too many. So we're actually gonna go ahead and take a couple more off that I don't like which direction they're going. This one is going straight up into the flower, and the other one I thought would just be too obtrusive. So again, we're gonna kind of come in here and test our waters. Okay, so see how high it is. I think that might be a little too high and off balance. So we're gonna trim it down. And how do we look now? That's much better. So now that I know about the height, I can trim the other one more rapidly. I don't want to, so I left on this one. It has a nice leaf to go behind it. Right there, you can kind of see it. So I'm actually going to leave that one because I like that contrast of the green leaves of the one that allows it to actually come down in the front. But I like how this one is providing a contrast, or some of these are providing a contrast against the ferns as well. Now what I'm also going to do is we have some more carnations, and I have actually 4. So I'm going to put some of these smattering in amongst them. Now there's not necessarily a huge recipe on this. This is just kind of, filling in and trying to make things look basically even and not too bad. Now I just realized I shoved that in on the back side where you can't see it at first, but see, look at this height. I want this to fill in and come down. So you can see that's way too high. So we need to trim this one down lower. All right, so here we go. Shove this one in. And there we go. So a nice little bit of color coming out on the sides. So we'll go here and shove this one in on another side, again, for some more color, because we only, like I said, put 2 of the hydrangeas in. All right, so I'm going to turn it around, and then we will come back in on these sides and shove a couple more of these flowers in. Now, what I want to also do to give a little bit of an airyish appearance is I want to come back with some more of the baby's breath to color in and provide something to kind of be airy behind here. So, it's a poor connection left. All right, so we're going to add in some of this to provide us, again, a little bit of smattering of color to kind of go with the top. And has some nice color and some nice freshness to it. All right, here is one more sprig of baby's breath that we will shove in here. So I'm going to turn it around and show it to you. And then see, kind of, only kind of so-so, but let's shove this in and look at the nice color there. Now, theoretically, I could have done this without the carnations, but they, again, just kind of help to round out some of it. Now, the other thing I could have done with the carnations, I could have made this one-sided and made like a bud vase, and then maybe put, down front a big hydrangea as well. That would have been another option. But I chose to make this so that it could be actually viewed, like you could put it in the middle of a table and viewed from at least 2 sides, if not all around, by sneaking in some of the carnations. So that is a personal choice I made, but anybody could make that decision as well. So that is most of what we were going to at least try to mention today, is some quick tips and tricks of some basic flower arranging. Keep in mind, I want to bring up again the whole bud vase. This was just with 3. If I'd have done 5, I just had found another way to stagger by like adding 1 in here and here. So that way I would have just staggered it a little bit more. Again, baby's breath is totally optional. The ferns is basically an old standard of what they use. But you can use other things. Like for example, I could come back now with these hydrangea leaves and I could actually wrap these in here just as well to make it look nice and maybe be something to kind of come down up front. Sorry, I got to turn this at me so I can see it better. But, you know, I could do something like that instead and maybe take out some of this fern foliage. So there's a lot of different greenery options. It's just if you are unsure of yourself, this could be the easiest option to do to make something look nice. And keep in mind too, if I did not like how tall these are, I could simply come in here and trim them out as well and trim them down like, you know, this one kind of sticks out pretty far. So let's trim you down a little bit so you're not quite so far out. Or these guys are sticking down. So we'll trim them out just to kind of round out the vase a little bit more and make it look nice. So some of this takes a little bit of an artistic eye just for some of the cleanup work, but for the most part, you can get obviously a pretty simple and easy vase very well. Now, just because you get a bouquet of flowers, it doesn't mean that you have to arrange it in a vase. You could just obviously take the bouquet, leave it mostly bound up, and yes, put it in the water and make it look nice that way. Making it into an actual arrangement is only, you know, personal choice and preference as to what you want to do or not do. Now, with that said, you know, you can easily do that, like I said, where you can drop it in, but make sure that you do remove at least most of that plastic that may have come around your plants. You know, or like, for example, you saw that my fern leaves were wrapped in paper. We definitely don't want the paper in there because it'll dissolve and make the water yucky really fast. And again, that will kind of thwart our efforts at trying to stay into a nice, clean arrangement for the plants to be in or the fresh flowers to be in. So make sure we're, again, watching for that we're trying to set up the best life. Now, why not the plastic? Well, just like, you know, if I were to put a Band-Aid on my skin, you know, and left it there, your hand kind of turns kind of mushy and yucky because it stays wet too long. Yes, the stems of these need to be in the water. But if you leave that plastic above where it's not necessary and where it could be touching more of like our greenery, like our leaves or our ferns, leaves or fronds, or even some of those, you know, parts on, you know, up here, like here in the chrysanthemum, because I tore them off down here. Even those leaves, if they were wrapped in that plastic too long, it could actually still cause it to, again, rot faster. So you do want it exposed to the air when it is appropriately in a house, in an office, or whatever. You want it to be appropriately kind of aired out at that time, because keeping it too enclosed could cause a problem as well. So it is good to do that. I will also point out, you know, we don't have a lot of questions yet. If you do have any questions on the Facebook Live event, do feel free to ask them in the chat pod. Maybe I'm doing that good of a job, but yeah, if you do have any questions, feel free to put them in there. Some things to point out as well. So these were obviously fresh hydrangea flowers. So they were shipped in, you know, from some other part of the country and used in this sort of arrangement. But keep in mind, you know, in series past that we've had, that we've talked about, this is nice for a fresh floral arrangement, but we could just as much go outside and pick some of the greenery from outside. So I could go find some dried hydrangea heads, say that 3 times fast. I could find some dried hydrangea heads, and I could make an arrangement with them. And instead of, you know, using these ferns, I could go cut a branch from a pine tree or a spruce tree, and that would have about the same general size and shape. So we can use other things for our landscape. What about the baby's breath? Maybe you have some ornamental grasses. Now remember, these are a dried rearrangement, so that also means we don't have to worry about the water in our vase. So it actually makes it a little bit simpler to go out and do something like that. So I could probably make a pretty interesting arrangement with just using, again, like I said, maybe a dried hydrangea head, a little bit of a sprig of some pine needles or spruce needles. Of course, so you may want to choose something more like a fir that actually isn't pokey. But then again, and again, like I said, we could also look up some of like our seed heads from a ornamental grass that also may look really nice. Another option could be is the fact that, you know, live forevers or a Shoney stonecrop plant, it has a nice dried flower head. So it itself could be a nice contrast against, again, a hydrangea head, or it itself could be the nice flower to use. While I reach and try to knock things off, it could be showy stonecrop in here in a bud vase instead of our carnations. So, or I'm sorry, our chrysanthemums. So yeah, or I'm sorry, yes, these are carnations, not chrysanthemums. Chrysanthemums are another option that you could make bud vases with. But again, yeah, showy stonecrop could be another option of something to do. The other things that you could add in would be things like if you have some red twig dogwoods or some willows, have really green stems, you could add in some of that. And those could be added even into a fresh vase. So if I had a nice red twig dogwood and I wanted to make this really stand out and vibrantly pop, I could probably put a twig of that in here or two to add some more to go with the pink of our carnations here. I could add, again, a red twig dogwood stem so that way it would just pop even greater and provide a little bit more of that color and pull out a little bit more of that pink than already is showing in this arrangement. So don't limit yourself to only fresh flowers. Again, there's a lot of other things that can work into it in arrangements. The floral industry now has tried to work in a lot of those things, and I usually see some nice, round-leafed plants as well as other, spikes and stuff like that they do work into different floral arrangements now to make them look nice. And keep in mind, they have been making an industry of, even if you want outside of your home, you can get different greenery to put outside of your home as well. If you have a blue spruce that has some good, needle growth, that adds some color. You can probably find maybe some English ivy that would also, these vases are primarily, I'll say like middle up. Well, if I could find some sprigs of something like English ivy, I said poison ivy. We don't want to touch poison ivy. That's another whole topic. But if I had some nice sprigs of even an English ivy, I could even put that in here to help kind of go down into the vase and add some, further attraction going down. That one it might be a little bit harder on, but in something like this one here that I was making, yeah, we could bring something and let it again come down and look pretty as it comes down further, or provide some more tuftiness down in here to basically provide some filler. What I would probably do here is the fact that I actually have some more of this tool, and what I could do is I could either make a bow and tie this to kind of, show it up, or just shove this into the planter to again have that. So another good lesson, don't use all of your supplies at once. You might find some other use for it as time goes on. So again, some other flowers to consider, snapdragons. We mentioned again, gladiolus stems. If you have those, watch out for them. Another one that commonly could be either wired or with the straw technique that you have might be something like a dahlia head. On dahlias, those again usually have a really long stem that can be kind of flimsy, or even a calla lily, really long flimsy stem. Those could benefit from some support over time because those are very soft stems, and if they break at all, they're not going to stand up well. Now, keep in mind, if they break also, that means the flower is going to fail faster because it's not getting that nutrition that we're trying to give it, the nutritional sugars. It's not going to get that going up to the plant very well. So you don't want to break stems. You don't want stems to get too floxy. And on the hydrangea, I was a little worried about it at first, but it has just enough vigor that it is standing tall. It's more of the leaves are really soft and flopsy. But you do have to watch that on really soft stem plants, that we need to make sure they get the nutrition, because again, without that nutrition, they are going to fail faster because they don't have the sugars to keep themselves growing. So that's why, again, it's important either to use those floral preservatives, or again, we've talked about those recipes where you're literally adding, again, sugar to the plant so that it has some sort of a nutrition source. Now, the other fun thing that you could do, especially if you have kids around, is even though I have, this carnation here, and it has a little bit of color on it, the other fun experiment, if you have little kids, that you can do is take some of these flowers and actually put them in colored water. And you can actually see if they color. And you can even test it against maybe baby's breath, for example, and see if they'll draw color up. You know, this is a fun little science experiment. I've even seen where people have split the stems of a carnation and put it in 2 different vases to see if it can, again, uptake the 2 different colors on the flower. I haven't always seen which colors work the best. Obviously, you want it to be concentrated, so you don't want it to be only like a light yellow in the water, or you may not see. And keep in mind, it's going to take a couple days for that to actually work. But those are options as well that you have of, you know, fun things you can do with your flowers, kind of after the day a little bit if you want, or maybe before. But that's one way that you can actually add some colorful interest to your flowers, especially if you have kids around. Now, the other thing you could do, that, because remember I mentioned that you could use dried flowers, you know, how to add some additional interest. If you have dried flowers, keep in mind they're dried, you know, oh well, what happens to them? That's where you might see that sometimes they use either a spray glue with glitter, or somehow otherwise dust these with a glitter to bring out some extra shine. You know, you can try even painting them, which distracts from it. But some of the hydrangeas, the way that they dry out, they don't dry brown. They might dry with a little bit of a red color in them or other colors in them. So they don't dry out all the way like that, which brings up a good point as well. When this hydrangea head starts to, you know, get on the, you know, slightly more failed side, that is something that we could do. We can switch this where we basically take it, pull it out, hang it upside down, and then we can try to dry it. And if we then dry it, we can make another vase with this of how to add life to your cut flowers. We could actually make it into then a dried arrangement later on and use our things like, again, the pines or the evergreens, or maybe even yews. Yews would give you a really nice soft foliage and act really well like the greenery ferns here. Some people say they smell, so watch out for that, that if you think they smell, don't use it. But you do have some other options there that you can do. Another, you know, coming off Christmas, think about it. We could use hollies with this as well. If you've got holly bushes or boxwoods in the area, you can use that for more interest as well. But again, we take the dried flowers and we could decorate them in that respect too, so that that way we have that interest into the flowers and into our arrangements. All right, so I'm not seeing questions yet. It's maybe just something that we don't have a lot of questions on, which is fine, but I do want to make sure to encourage one last time that if you do have questions, we will be wrapping up here in about 10 minutes-ish. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in. So again, like I said, just to kind of wrap up as a reminder, but to go through the steps again. So if I'm going to get flowers, I'm not going to just, boom, shove them into a vase. Remember what we talked about from the very beginning, is we have to first consider, what are we putting them in? You know, what's the purpose? We may have just a single bud vase we try to put them in, or you may have something like this bigger vase that I have. And if we want, again, these to be the best containers possible, we again want them to be clean. So we're going to want to actually take these and scrub them out, you know, wash them out really well, or just shake it. If you've got a brush, it'll get all the way down in here. That's awesome, because this has got a little bit of a bulb at the bottom. If we can get it cleaned all the way down in there, that's the best option. I haven't seen the question of, well, you know, this is obviously clear. Is colored better? Not necessarily, I'm going to say. You know, I added some color to this one because that way, you know, this one you can, well, kind of see the stems through this one, and it only kind of looks so-so. You know, you can tell which ones I stuck further in than not. But this one, obviously, when you look at this one's base, you see some of the stubbed ends, but it just makes it look a little bit nicer because you don't see as much of it. And again, it provided me some stability. You know, you could use a colored vase. It's not really necessarily going to hurt anything. It might prevent things like it turning green as much, because whenever light and water hit, there's a chance that algae can form over time. So certain colored vases may help to diminish some of that, but I'm not going to say by a long shot. What I will also point out is, like I said, I use this kind of tooling in the bottom. I could have, if I wanted even better stability on a larger vase, you can put that Sahara foam in it. If you do, remember that it needs moistened, and it's not like you can just shove it in water. That stuff is best if you actually have like a bucket or a bowl full of water, set the Sahara foam on top, and let it gradually absorb the water. you need to do it that way so that way it actually gets all the way through the entire brick of it, because again, that stuff is supposed to provide stability as well as water holding capacity. So you need to make sure it absorbs it slowly over time. And remember, it's not putty or Play-Doh. So if you stick something in it and you're like, oh, well, no, wait, I want it like this instead. If you poke too many holes, it becomes no good anymore. So you do have to watch out for that. And especially, you know, on larger stems like these, you have to watch out for it. Now, if you have a soft stem, like again, we talked about our tulips and stuff and daffodils. Those softer stems are probably not going to stick through that Sahara foam well enough. You will need something like a pencil or a small diameter screwdriver to basically jab it in first in order to provide it. Or again, go back to that straw technique. If you put a straw over their stem and jab it in, that will work for you in that case. So, okay, again, so we have our clean container, whether we're going to have something in the bottom or, you know, something decorative in it or not. We'll put all that in and make sure it's all good and clean before we get started. Then we're going to start maybe prepping the water for our flowers. So we want this in lukewarm water. We want it to be fully dissolved. We want it in the right concentration. So again, make sure you read the back of your packets. They've got directions on them. They say it in different ways, but they both agree on these so far. They both agree that it's supposed to be in 1 pint of water. On these other recipes that we were making, it makes approximately, it says 1 quart of water. So you're going to have different recipes. Make sure you scale it up and down accordingly. Again, on some of these other recipes, it may either call for a lemon lime carbonated beverage. Bleach was a very common one that was in all of them, for half a teaspoon of bleach in each of them. And then you needed like sugar as well, or like I said, the lemon juice or vinegar were other options too. If you need that recipe again, this publication again was the Purdue publication about add hours to your flowers, and it was HO 158. Again, on the back of it, it will give you the recipes for all of them that you have. So again, we'll make our special water so that we're ready to put our flowers into it. We'll put it into the vase that we're going to use. Then we bring our flowers home carefully. So we make sure to not expose them to the to the low temperatures or the high temperatures. If it's during the summer, we still can't leave them in there because we don't want them to get too hot. So we don't expose them to bad temperatures. And then we take them, and when we cut them, remember what we did? We made sure that we cut these underwater at an angle. So again, remember, we made sure that it has that angle cut here at the base. And by that angle cut, we make sure that it can always hopefully hit somewhere so that, you know, only unless it, you know, miraculously lands at the angle we literally cut it at, it's going to have some sort of a surface available for imbibing that water. The other thing is too, is if you think of it, if I jab this over and over, you know, because this is angled, only this very tip is getting marred up again so that it probably cannot uptake water. Whereas if this was flat, the whole base is getting marred up and cut up and destroyed so that it may not imbibe water well enough. And then it defeats the purpose of your nice water. So again, angled cut, and we make the cut underwater, unlike what you saw me do most of today, just because I was in a hurry and didn't want to make too much of a mess on my laptop. But we're going to make an angled cut underwater, leave it there, maybe for a count of 10, just to allow it to uptake what it wants to, and then that's when we'll take it and do it. You can do it under running water. It's just sometimes people, they'll get in a hurry and I want to cut them all at once, and then that's when it's probably easier under, you know, a bucket of water. And it's not that hard to, you know, find a bowl or something and get a whole bucket of water. So we're going to cut them under a bucket of water, you know, as we need them especially, and then we're going to arrange them in the vase. Again, this was about 3 sprigs of the fern greenery, and then we had 3 flowers, and again, the baby's breath is a very nice addition. You could consider other flowers if you have it, or you can not use it. Again, you could use other forms of greenery, including like the yews that I mentioned later, if you want to add, you know, a little bit of a different texture. That is totally up to you. Or remember how I added in actually the hydrangeas leaves onto this one to kind of give it a little bit of a different appearance, since I had some leftover ones from the other arrangement. So again, we're going to have 3. We stagger the height on the 3, or we can have 5, and we just, again, just find a way to kind of slightly stagger the heights. But keep in mind, your vase is going to rule what you can put in, because when I look in at this vase, this neck of it here is very tight. So I can't fit too much more in it. And again, remember, it does no good. It's probably going to be hard to see, but I'll try to show it the best. If you look at this hydrangea leaf, I said, well, yeah, I wanted to add it in. The bottom of that leaf stem is actually right there. My water level is about 1 inch below it. So that tells me that, well, yes, if I want these hydrangea leaves to actually last really long, I have to fill the water. Well, this one's actually even shorter. The stem ends right here. So I'm going to have to fill the water to almost the brim of this container in order for it to have enough to keep these leaves healthy. So these might be either a temporary addition or don't add them at all because, again, like I said, you got to make sure the stems get all the way down into the water. And remember, as I was shoving flowers in, the ferns helped to provide the stability inside the stem here so that these actually stayed where I shoved them. If I'm actually pulling on these now, yeah, I can move this a little bit, but you will notice as you start shoving them in, it gets harder and harder to shove them in. And remember, because of that, that's why we also trimmed off like some of these extra leaves. As I was shoving these in, I started trimming them off more and more because I could feel the tightness developing in the stem of a vase that I have. And the other one, it was not so much of a problem. I didn't need to because you see here, we can see clearly in and they're fine. In here, it just became more of, I don't want that stuff rotten in the water so that way we develop that bacteria and microorganisms that are basically going to not do well for our plants. Theoretically, if we are using our preservatives or our water cleaning, well, this will help to actually disinfect a little bit. If we're using these floral solutions while we're making these arrangements, theoretically, that will actually help to overcome some of that aspect so it's not as bad. But again, why try to create a problem that you can avoid if you just take that extra minute to do that? One other thing I will point out is the fact that, especially if you're using cut flowers from your own garden, do realize, again, this is a carnation, but the other common flower that is used a lot are roses. Realize that, there is not necessarily a nice thornless rose. Realize that part of those roses, when they get them, some of the first steps they do is to dethorn them. So if you do have something like a rose, you may want to dethorn it, even if you're putting it in one of these vase arrangements. Because think about it, that thorn is going to pierce, or as you shove it down, it's going to cut and possibly rip everything as it goes down. And that again kind of defeats your purpose of trying to keep the water and everything inside of it nice and kosher. So it might be nice to dethorn anything that has, thorns or stickers so that way you have less damage to everything else that is going into your arrangement. Oh, there we go, get the bucket out of the way. All right, so we're gonna put them in nicely. We're gonna make a nice arrangement and have that. And if we're expecting, I got it for Valentine's Day, which is on Sunday, but what about I have some company coming over for dinner on Friday night? What can I do? Well, we can't put this outside because it'll freeze. But remember, we could try to put this in the refrigerator overnight, but we need to remember, this cannot be around what again? Fresh fruits and vegetables, because again, they give off the ethylene gas, which these are too. The flowers here, they're going to be giving it off too, but a much lower quantity as a lot of our fruits and vegetables that are ripening and things like that. Again, apples are about your worst enemy. So even, something to consider, I usually have a bowl of fruit sitting on my counter so that way my kids can grab a healthy snack whenever they want. It wouldn't obviously be a great idea to put this right next to that bowl of fruit, because then it's just going to sit there and breathe the whole time, the ethylene on my flowers that are right there. It's going to be better for me to space them out like arm length apart so that way it has a chance to dissipate in the air before it gets to it. Or I put this on my table when instead the rest is in my kitchen. So try to give it some airspace away from things that are going to be giving off that ethylene ripening agent. So again, keep them cold. And then if you do see, this flower's not looking so hot, well, then we might want to get rid of it, because if it's not looking so good, it's going to make everything else die off that much faster. So, maybe it'll look a little silly to just have two in it for a while, but at least you get to have the two longer than if you only had, or if you had the one going bad in there. So sometimes it might be best to sacrifice the one flower for the look of them all, because hopefully by that time you've enjoyed it, maybe a week, who knows, at least several days to a week. Carnations do tend to have a long life, so you can enjoy those for several days. Other flowers don't always have as long as a life. Some of your more soft flowers, these you think of being kind of tall, erect, and very nicely shaped, firm flowers, whereas some of your softer ones like a tulip or a daffodil, some daffodils have a long life, but many of them can be short-lived in a vase, like a couple days max. Whereas a carnation can sometimes live for maybe up to a week if treated nice. And again, if we provided some sort of food and nutrition while it is sitting in the vase, it will actually do well and, be able to last a little bit longer. I think it's half the reason why mine don't, is because I don't provide it anything in the water to keep feeding it. And we can change this water occasionally. We can add fresh, we can dump out part of it and add in fresh, just to kind of renew, what is in there, because obviously it's going to pull it out or it's going to evaporate out. So it is good to check your water occasionally and maybe even freshen the water occasionally if you want the best health. All right, so I'm not seeing any further questions or comments coming in. So I would like to wish you all a happy Valentine's Day if you desire, or just to have a nice floral arrangement to hopefully maybe brighten your day and your week up. We might need to see some color and brightness with all the snow we're getting right now. So, happy weekend for those of you who might be getting an extended weekend with the President's Day coming up. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great time. And until next time, again, my name is Nikky Witkowski with the Porter County Extension Office, and this is in conjunction with Gabis Arboretum under Purdue Northwest. So we thank you all and hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.